Yeah, good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah,
Do we have some more time?
yeah, madam. Can we wait for 5 minutes? Actually, the
Okay,
session
okay.
starts at 2 p.m., madam. That's
Sure, ma'am. Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. So, dear participants, today we are entering into the afternoon session of our STTP, that is Recent Trends in Environmental Geotechnics for Sustainable Development. Today, earlier morning also, I mentioned that we are once again lucky enough that one of the very prominent and expert speaker, that is Dr. Pratashu Jayanti from NIT Andhra Pradesh, has accepted our invitation. I'm really thankful once again, madam, that you very humbly accepted our invitation and she agreed to deliver an expert lecture in this STTP in spite of this busy academic activities going at NIT. So I consider as a privilege that I got an opportunity to introduce the madam. So madam did his MTech and PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, that is IIT Bombay, in the year 2016. I actually, the madam's CV, that is resume, is so big that, but I just want to mention a few of the things that madam has a keen interest, research interest, and madam is working continuously in the field of application of sustainable materials for stabilizing fine-grained soils using desiccation induced cracking. Madam has presented as well as published more than 20 research papers in a very highly referred and reputed journals. Madam is presently also working on some of the aspects of this topic. Madam has also a good exposure of industry as well as international exposure under the supervision of Professor Elazar Terenito from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Strathclyde, that is Glasgow, Scotland, under the scheme of GREAT, that is the Geotechnical and Geological Responses to Climate Change, where Madam had an opportunity to work and visit the institute. Madam has also lot many programming skills, or I would say the expertise on the various softwares like Image, Soil Vision, Expert HI, MATLAB, Taxis, State, GIS, and many other software tools. Madam presently is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, that is at National Institute of Technology, Andhra Pradesh. Along with the academic responsibility, Madam also holds the various position as a department placement coordinator, as well as he constitutes the committee for building construction, for the budget estimate of the digital project report for the permanent campus at NIT. She is also has served as a girls warden for the academic year 17-18. Madam is also the faculty advisor of Civil Engineering Association for NIT Andhra Pradesh, convener of Acumen, one of the technical fest held by Vasavi College of Engineering. Madam has also been the part of many co-curricular activities, organizing 5 days faculty development program in environmental geotechnics in October 2020. Then Madam participated in effective teaching and evaluation methods of engineering education by Teaching and Learning, that is NIT Warangal. Also, Madam, I have attended many international and national programs. So it's a great privilege that, Madam, you have accepted our invitation and have agreed to deliver this expert lecture. So now, Madam, I hand over the session to you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Manish. That was a very kind introduction. Good afternoon, dear participants. I'll just share my screen now. Yeah, I'm Dr. Jayanti N.V. Pratyusha. As Dr. Manish told, I'm working at NIT Andhra Pradesh. And I'm privileged to give this lecture today on sustainable materials, that is actually the main theme of this STTP, the recent trends in environmental geotechnics for sustainable developments. So I feel it, or I take it as a privilege to share my knowledge. I would not say that I am an expert in this area, but I would say that I'd like to share the knowledge that I have gained through my research or through my different exposures or whatever it is. So I just wanted to share all those information or knowledge that I have gained, or my ideas of what sustainable materials are and what sustainable development is. So to begin with, to talk about a material, wherein civil engineering materials are being used, or what is the importance of materials in civil engineering, and what are the different types of materials that we are adopting in conventional civil engineering. We generally use stones, bricks for the masonry activities. Soil, lime and cement have been used since ages for binding material or as a mortar. Sand and gravel for the filling and for the strength aspect of the structure that you're creating. Steel, aluminum and wood have been used as reinforcement. So each type of material has different functions, and each of them are natural resources that are products of natural resources that we are creating and that are being used used for various civil engineering activities. And now infrastructure being developing at such a pace that the material demand has increased exponentially, and everywhere you find some or the other construction activity going on. If you need a good quality construction, you need to provide good material for the construction activity. You cannot, there have been different advancements in the technologies that are being used in the construction, but there has been no construction without using the basic civil engineering materials for the construction activity. That is to be identified, that the demand for the materials is never ending, and it will only keep on increasing, but it will never subside as per my knowledge. So these are the materials which we generally use. And if I talk about the applications oriented towards the geotechnical specialized projects, geotechnical being my specialization, we use different types of materials in foundations, starting from concrete, reinforcement, cement and all these. And apart from that, pavements, where subgrade also has a greater role to play to take care of the pavement. We have different types of pavements, different levels in which the pavement is laid. Everywhere the material you are using, the quality of material you are using, the type of material, the life and durability of the material has a role to play. Embankments, one of the important projects that the government generally takes up. All these embankments are uses lot of different varieties of materials depending on the project and the type of situation. Containments, where I talk about maybe a water containment facility, wastewater containment facility, or waste containment facility, be it a municipal solid waste containment facility or a hazardous waste containment facility, or it can also be a nuclear waste containment facility. Every containment facility has a different application and a different purpose to achieve. And each of these containment facilities needs different requirements or different materials to serve their purpose. In that aspects, we can imagine what is the extent of research that is being carried out to identify the suitable material that can act as a good container or a good containment facility, because it has to take care of a lot of aspects. Apart from giving strength to it, I have to ensure that my containment facilities are impermeable. It is not letting out anything move into my surroundings, right? So all these are something that we have to take care when I'm going to take up any project. It can be anything. Filling material, so most of the cases we have mines that have been evacuated, we have lands that are being filled, we have lakes and water bodies that are being filled up, or wells that are being filled up and are being reused for infrastructural development or for land, for development of land or whatever. So everywhere we need some filling material, a filler. What this material is and where from will you get this material? What type of material has to be used is a big challenge for the engineers there. Next comes the land reclamation activities. With the growing population, with the growing infrastructural activity, growing demand for all types of modern activities, availability of land has become a big question mark or a challenge to the engineers. So getting land, the area of the land available is limited. I can only go vertically. It is difficult to expand horizontally because land constraint is one of the major challenges that the current engineers are facing, or current engineering stream is facing. In such cases, reclamation of land has become one of the what you say, it has created an era, or it has created a mark in the era by introducing this concept of land reclamation, wherein the land is being reclaimed into water bodies, be it a river, be it sea, be it ocean. We might have come across many such land reclamation activities, and one of the major activities being palm islands. So where there is constraint or limitation for availability of land or good land for construction, we are exploring into creation of artificial land by the activity of land reclamation. So this is one of the advanced, or I should say the recent application that is in demand, where people are into land reclamation and what type of material to be used for land reclamation. Next are the ground improvement activities. Why ground improvement is required? It's because all the available soils are not of same type. Everywhere you find different type of soil, and for every meter deep that you go, there will be a change in the soil, its properties, its functionalities, everything. I cannot use all types of soil for any type of construction, or any type of soil for any type of construction. I need my soil to give certain strength, certain durability, certain bearing capacity to take care of the structure that is going to come in it, or that is to be built with it or built within it. Then I have to be careful, or I have to be very choosy in the type of soil that I'll be selecting for the construction. But I have previously mentioned that we have land constraint. I cannot plan a project elsewhere because the land is not suitable for that particular structure, because there might be many other applications associated with that project which has to come up there itself. For suppose if I'm going for construction of a dam, I cannot say that I'll go and construct my dam in Hyderabad if it has to be made in East Godavari district. I have to ensure that my dam is constructed where the water body is available, a reservoir or a dam. So the soil below should be able to support the dam or the reservoir that is going to come up. In that case, I tend to alter the properties of the existing soil so that they become, or the soil becomes suitable for my project's construction. There we bring in the concept of ground improvement, or in other words, we also call it as soil stabilization. So these are the multiple aspects wherein we bring in the applications or geotechnical applications, where we require a lot of different varieties of materials that are to be used. So knowing what are the materials that are available, why are we still in search of some or the other new material? Why has ever the concept of sustainable materials come into picture? Why are we not satisfied with the existing material? Earlier we had a lot of other materials, like initially we had stones. Still man has invented brick. We had soil and lime. Still we have invented cement. And in cement we have lot of variations depending on their application. So we are not satisfied, or the material itself is not satisfying certain criteria, or we are not satisfied by its performance, and hence we are venturing into some more materials or new materials, and what are those issues that are associated with the existing conventional material that the man has faced or has been facing since long. First of all, it's the availability of material in required quantity and at suitable location at suitable price too. I need to have the material available all the time for the construction of a project. It should be available in suitable quantity so that my project can be completed without any issues. Further, it should be available in the required location or nearby the project so that I can get an easy access to the material, as well the transportation and other costs can be minimized if the availability of material is near to the project site. And of course, the economy of the project also matters. Hence, I cannot afford material of greater cost that goes beyond the project. So this has become one of the concern or an issue associated with the conventional material, which led us to find another solution. And when I talk about the environmental issues that are associated with the conventional materials, firstly, it's the mining of raw materials. There is extensive mining of raw materials that is being practiced since long for manufacturing of some other artificial products or the next stage products, so that they can be used for infrastructural activities, be it metals, be it stones, whatever it is. We are continuously doing the activity of mining. Mining has its own concerns in terms of environmental aspects, like that you have to take care of the gases that might come out of the mines. You might have to take care of the water bodies or streamlines that are adjacent to it, streaming of the water bodies, else it might be causing flooding, or there might be some additional reactions that might take place after the mine is dug. So in fact, we are actually disturbing the natural state of the soil by doing so much of our extensive mining. And if I leave it open, again that will be an issue. It's a great environmental hazard that we are leaving an open cast mine without filling it up properly, because there is a possibility of leaching or creation of acids within the system. And even when I talk about the uncontrolled quarrying that is going on for the rocks, for the gravel, for stones that is used for the constructional activity, we are almost destroying all the hills that are available in the nature. So in that scenario, if I am talking, I am disturbing the nature, its stability, its creation and its formation. So one day or the other, the nature is going to revert whatever we have done to it. All these are the human interventions that we are doing to the nature. Next, associated with the processing and manufacturing of products, when all the raw materials or minerals that I have extracted will be sent further for processing or for production of some other material or manufacturing of its product. So in that process, I am creating lot of pollution to the environment in terms of air, in terms of water, or in terms of solid waste. I am creating lot of byproducts. I am releasing lot of gases that are depleting my environment. I am releasing lot of leachates or industrial emissions are being let out into the adjacent water bodies that are not only contaminating the water bodies but also the soils that are associated with those water bodies or in the process. So altogether, an industry system which is working to produce few tons of a material is creating multifold times of emissions into the environment, which is degrading the quality of the environment. These are all again affecting ourselves, our health, our food chain, our habits, our lifespan, everything. So that is one of the major concern, and this is where I am exclusively talking only about the products or materials that are used for infrastructural activities. There are many other concerns associated with other industrial activity that is going on, be it in terms of pharmacy, be it in terms of any other material that is used by the medical or whatever it is. So there are many such aspects that are still under concern and creating a lot of problems. And further, when I use these products that I have created into the soil for in the form of foundation or in the form of soil stabilizer for reclamation or for filling up of land, I am letting these materials to interact with the natural soil that is available. So the soil, as it has been discussing or it is being discussing in this session or in these sessions of SCTP, is not an inert material. It is an active material. In some form or the other, it is highly active. So when it is active and when it comes in contact with these external materials that we are putting for the sake of stabilization or for the sake of reclamation, what would be the response of these materials with soil? How my soil is going to respond? How my soil is going to interact with it? Is it going to be a positive response or a negative response? I cannot tell it that it is going to be exactly positive or negative because it varies with the type of soil, with the type of material and the activity that is present inside my soil. What type of soil it is. So this is where the tendency for the soil to get contaminated is happening. So these materials, when improperly instigated into the soil or excessively instigated into the soil, are going to contaminate my soil by releasing their chemicals that are present or changing the state of soil. So this soil contamination is going to alter my soil's response and behavior drastically. There are tremendous studies that have been carried out which have inferred that the soil has changed its basic Atterberg limits too, in addition to its strength and other bearing capacity aspects when it has interacted with such contaminants. So this is where soil contamination has a major role to decide on what soil is. So we grout the soil, we stabilize the soil, and we think everything is done from our part. But over a period of time, be it a short-term or a long-term activity, the soil is definitely going to respond with whatever is present in it. And how this is going to influence or how this is going to respond in future or how this is going to impact the surroundings or the geo-environment is what matters a lot. And next I'm talking about the groundwater contamination. So when these materials present in it start leaching out the elements or any other metals that are present in it, there might be possibility of groundwater contamination, washing off these materials due to seepage would also lead to groundwater contamination, and some of the reactions that these materials undergo in the soils. For suppose if I have organic soils and I have treated with lime or cement, the gases that release because of the heat that gets generated during the heat of hydration that is happening, that is increasing the temperature, the cement's reaction or lime's reaction, might release some volatile gases. These gases might or will lead to the greenhouse gas emissions and thereby cause air pollution. So these are all something that is unexpected or unforeseen that is happening with the soil, within the soil. And when I talk about the extinction of natural resources, that I should have this, though it is put in the last part of the environmental issues, this is the prime concern that is associated with the conventional materials. Is this material available in sufficient quantity to meet the present and the future demand? Extinction is a big problem. How long, or the earth takes few hundreds of years to create all those mines, or few thousands of years to create few deposits of minerals. We are excavating them instantaneously, we are mining them out, and ultimately where from fresh resources will be available within the earth. We are forcing nature and we are extracting things out of it and you are not giving it back in any way. So the soil, or we should say that the materials are going extinct or being unavailable for construction activity. So this is the picture showing about the contamination, groundwater contamination, soil contamination, the greenhouse gas emissions. All these are being shown here. So the next concerns, other than the natural, the environmental concerns and the availability concerns, the soil also has certain activity or certain reaction that it is being undergone, which I was mentioning about. So when I am putting all this cement and all for filling material or for stabilizing material, cement and lime, these are materials which when undergo the cementitious reaction try to release some heat, which is called as heat of hydration. So this heat of hydration would lead to moisture migration, which is unwanted. The heat that is being generated during the process of reaction of cement or lime that is present in the soil would lead to unwanted heat, unwanted moisture migration within the soil, which might lead to differential stresses or development of non-uniform stresses within the body or within the soil, and ultimately lead to cracking of the soil. Cracking is one such aspect which is under research and where people are trying to look into the mechanism or have evolved at the mechanism, and they are trying to find application where they can minimize these cracks or arrest cracks. Even I have done my thesis under the guidance of Professor D.N. Singh to stabilize or arrest cracks using some sustainable materials like blast furnace slag and red mud for minimizing the cracks in different types of soils. And we have been quite successful in this regard too. So talking about this, cracking is one such aspect which affects the stability of a structure or integrity of the structure. Also, the soil's integrity would be disturbed. And ettringite formation is another concern that is associated with sulfate bearing soils. Not all the soils are of same type, and every soil's location is or the location of a soil basically guides on what type of soil it is, how it is responding, and what are its properties. So sulfate bearing soils have this tendency to form ettringites, which are nedular or nodular type of structures that forms in the presence of calcium. So calcium actually, when it is used for stabilization, has to form calcium hydroxide and other cementitious products so that they create proper bond between the soil particles and thereby improve the soil's properties. But what actually happens when I use this calcium bearing calcium substitutes in sulfate bearing soils is they form these ettringites which are nothing but the calcium sulfate hydrates. Calcium, instead of forming hydrates, directly forms sulfates, and these calcium sulfates tend or make the soil to swell in excess than than its permissible limit, thereby affecting the integrity of the soil. Integrity of the soil. And improper functioning of these materials present in the soil due to lack of curing or due to lack of proper environment of temperature and moisture and all these things, strength gain of these materials or the soil would also be disturbed. So ultimately, are these materials going to, or are they performing perfectly fine in the ground as they are performing in the superstructures? This is what is of a major concern, where we are questioning the functionality of the materials, not only in terms of their environmental issues, but also in terms of their ability to improve the soil or suit or perform well for their requirement which they have been chosen for. So when we have so many issues or so many problems associated with the conventional material, the next alternative in our mind would be how to substitute these materials. What are the materials that are available? So the only thing other than natural materials that we have in excess is the man-made waste. This is the only thing that is available in plenty and is underutilized as per the norms or as per the research that is being done. Something where we are not touching the natural resources, and we have some other alternative which is going to suffice our requirement. So these man-made waste are nothing but the ones which are coming as the industrial byproducts, which we are creating out of many activities, anthropogenic activities, for the development of a nation, for the development of the economy and the society. So we'll discuss about some industrial products in this lecture, and the other is the constituents of the municipal solid waste. So municipal solid waste in our country mostly comes in the form of a mixed waste, which is comprised of lot of other constituents which are not only food and organic waste. You have lot of inert waste present in it. You have plastics. We also add on the glass, ceramics, and construction and demolition waste, lot of soil or inert soils that come out of the household activities and other activities. So there are some materials even in the MSW which are not degraded for the sake of the functioning of the landfill, and are also adding on to the volume of the landfill unnecessarily. So all these materials are the waste that are coming out of the anthropogenic activities. Now, I would rather say, if I am able to use all these materials as substitutes by looking into their properties, why should I call it as a man-made waste? Why not we call it as man-made resources? During my PhD, Professor D.N. Singh and myself have evolved with this term of man-made resources, and even during the keynote lecture of Professor D.N. Singh, he was mentioning about the man-made resources, which are nothing but all these products that we are creating out of the activities, extensive industrial activity, and the waste that we are creating out of our domestic activities. All these form the man-made resources. Now, what could be some of these, or the why should we call them as resource? Why not waste? Is firstly, the availability of these materials is not at all a concern, because you have plenty of volume of these materials available that are lying unused and are simply going waste instead of bringing into a proper use. Nothing is waste. Everything has application somewhere or the other. We just need to identify those applications and use them properly. Next is, there is no manufacturing process involved because they are already byproducts of manufacturing process. So I can severely cut down on the cost that is used in manufacturing, and I am also cutting down on these environmental concerns or issues associated with the manufacturing process. So thereby these products are acting as good substitutes where materials are being processed or manufactured. They act as good substitutes for conventional materials through research which they have identified their characteristics, their properties, their performance, that they are able to substitute all these materials, the conventional materials, through their performance and through their composition. Nextly, the cost involved is only the transportation cost, as we have already discussed that there is no manufacturing process or technique that is associated with it. It is only the cost associated with the transportation of material from wherever it is being produced. So that is the bare minimum cost one has to bear when they have to go with any activity or go for any project. I am cutting down on the consumption of natural resources or raw materials. This is one of the most significant add-on to these byproducts or waste materials we are talking about, because if I am able to substitute these conventional materials, at least to some extent, I am tremendously cutting down on the misuse of the natural resources or overuse of the natural resources, so that I can save a lot for the future generation. I am not emptying the mother earth, or I am not cutting down or making my future generations thrive or have a thirst for such type of availability of minerals. The major aspect associated with these byproducts or waste materials is their storage and disposal. How much should I store? How much can I store? What is the volume that is being produced and what is the volume that I am able to store? How much land will it be available for storing so much of material? How much can I discard into my water bodies? There are also issues associated with discarding them into water bodies. No, the governing bodies are not going to let me discharge them into the water bodies, as they are going to affect the aquatic life. The aquatic environment gets affected. So I have to store them on land. Even if I store them on land, how much of volume can I store? How much land is available again to dispose them off in the landfills or within the premises of the industry? That has become a big concern. So if I use them off in bulk for my infrastructural activities, the volume can get consumed. So a lot of volume or bulk volume can get consumed, thereby reducing the amount to be stored or disposed of. Life of landfills can be increased because all these materials are not going back to the landfills for disposal, because I am using them for some or the other applications. And the main issue is, even if I have land for storing or disposing these materials, there are a lot of environmental issues and health issues that are associated with disposing or discarding this waste without proper care. There are a lot of aspects like there'll be these are very fine in nature. They might contaminate the air. If there is any leaching that is happening when in contact with water, groundwater or soil might get contaminated. It might contain heavy metals which might leach out into the environment. If it contaminates the groundwater, it is going to enter into the food cycle. And if it is let out into the air, there are a lot of respiratory problems associated. So every material that you take, every byproduct or every waste material that you take cannot be just discarded or disposed of in the landfill or cannot be incinerated. There needs to be some consuming power or consuming ability for these materials, such that we can use up these materials so that they do not become a burden to the industries, as well as we are taking care of the needs of the infrastructural activity that is growing day by day, the modern technologies and modern type of constructional activities. So going into the availability of the construction materials, some of the few man-made resources that I'd like to discuss about are fly ash, ground granulated blast furnace slag, red mud, rice husk ash, silica fumes, bagasse ash, construction and demolition waste, and non-recyclable plastic. So these are some of the resources which I'd like to discuss on. A very few intricate details I'd be presenting about these materials. So fly ash, which is a byproduct of thermal power plant. So 70% of the power generation in our country completely depends on the thermal power plant, which uses coal as the base or the raw material. So I am not able to stop, or I cannot stop the production of power, because without power the growth of the economy or life of the human comes to a halt. I guess we can realize this. Even if there is a power cut for 1 hour, we cannot, or our life gets suffocated. So this power cannot be put on hold. Generation of power. For generation of power, I need to bring raw material like coal and burn it to generate power or run the turbines. When I am burning the coal, I am producing these ashes, which are called as the fly ash. This fly ash is very fine and is of powder form, amorphous form, which when left unattended is going to create a lot of respiratory problems. And imagine what could be the amount. We have around 250 million tons of volume of fly ash that is being produced per annum in our country. And the people have realized, the governing bodies have realized, the industries have realized, and even the engineers and scientists have realized that this material has a potential, and it can be used for a lot of applications in construction sector itself. And policies have been introduced by the government to use this material or make this material available within the vicinity of construction activity or within the plant, near to the plant, at cheaper prices, so that the material can be consumed of in volumes, and so that we can reduce on the amount that is being disposed of or that is left open. So far 78% is being consumed by the construction sector, and still the government is aiming to reach to 100%. And if I look into the applications, fly ash is being used to make bricks, cement, almost 30% is being replaced in cement. It is used in making concrete, tiles, roads, even as filling material. It is also used in reclamation of land. Even in agriculture and land development, the fly ash finds its applications to improve the properties of the soil or make it more fertile. It is used as soil stabilizer to improve the soil's engineering properties because of its pozzolanic nature or the tendency to form cementitious products in the presence of right pH conditions or an activator. And it is also used in making zeolites. Professor Singh has spoken about zeolites in the keynote lecture, where these zeolites being these active materials that are being used in many sectors like that of agriculture for controlled release of fertilizers and all these. So zeolites can be natural as well as artificial. Fly ash can be used to make such artificial zeolites, which can be used for improving the soil properties in its water retention ability or nutrient retention ability. So such is the scope of fly ash, and we are able to achieve up to 78% of consumption of this fly ash, and research is still going on in finding more applications or more suitability of this fly ash. And depending on its source of the coal or type of the coal, the type of fly ash also varies, and its ability to be used for various activities also keep on changing. So if it is a subbituminous coal, I'll be able to produce class C fly ash, and if it's a bituminous coal, I'll be able to produce class F fly ash, and the quality of fly ash also keeps on changing. So I should just take care of what type of fly ash it is and what is it that is required to enhance its properties, so that I can make the best use out of the fly ash, which mainly constitutes of 30 to 60% silica and 15 to 30% of alumina as their major components, and can be used as the best replacement for cement. And when I talk about the ground granulated blast furnace slag, which comes as a byproduct from steel or iron plant or iron manufacturing plant, wherein the after the pure form or after extraction of the pure form of the iron, whatever molten is left is considered as the waste or considered as the slag, which is cooled to form the slag. Now, how I am cooling this is whether I am doing a rapid cooling or a gradual cooling decides the product that is being formed. Whether I am creating a granulated blast furnace slag or I am pelletizing it depends on how am I cooling it. So this ground granulated blast furnace slag is obtained by rapid cooling of the slag or the molten slag that is coming out of the steel plant. And for every ton of pig iron that is processed, I get around 300 to 540 kg of slag, and for every ton of steel that is being produced, 100 to 150 kg of slag is being produced. So the volume again is tremendous and is available in huge quantities that is being just disposed of as it is. So after the quenching of the molten slag, granules of the slag are created, which are ground or processed further to make this fine powder as you see in the picture. And the physical property varies with the cooling process, is what I was mentioning. The gradual cooling would result in a crystalline form of slag, and glassy and amorphous slag is created due to quick or rapid cooling of the molten slag. So whichever slag is created, it has its own properties and its own application, which can be used for multiple activities. We have studied in civil engineering materials that you can create different forms of cement using slag. We have Portland slag cement and we have Portland pozzolanic cement, where slag is a good substitute. And one special aspect of slag is its low heat of hydration. This low heat of hydration suffices one aspect of cement which has very high heat of hydration. So where there is possibility of reducing the heat of hydration to control the unwanted moisture migration, thereby that leads to the cracking of soil, I can use this slag as a replacement with sufficient or a suitable activator, so that it can enhance its properties and perform well as a cementitious material. I will be able to take care of the heat of hydration completely, and this becomes a complete replacement or a very good replacement of the high heat of hydration cement, or even cement that is used in area where water is scarce, where you cannot use more water for curing. Portland slag cement is used so that I can cut down on the heat that is being generated during the process of cementation. Such such significant is this property of slag. And when we look into the properties or composition, it is rich in oxides of silicon, or silica is of 30 to 40%, alumina is of 15 to 20%. It also has calcium oxide, as coke is used in the process of melting of molten slag or creation of the molten iron. Hence, it has some good percentage of calcium too, around 30 to 40%, depending on the ore that is being used, or the percentage of coke that is being used. And magnesium is around 8%. So this is a very good composition that can be directly used as a replacement of cement or any other cementitious materials that we are using for altering the materials or soils properties or any other properties of the structure or in concrete. Next, I'd like to talk about the red mud. So you have heard very much from Dr. Hanmant Rao, where he spoke about bauxite residues. So you might have a good understanding of what red mud is by now. It is a byproduct of alumina industry and bauxite residues. Bauxite, when processed by Bayer's process, gives or generates the red mud. So red mud has, for every 1 ton of aluminium that is being produced, or alumina that is being produced out of bauxite by Bayer's process, around 1.5 to 2 tons of red mud is being produced. So around 1.5 to 2 times of red mud is being created when alumina is being manufactured. I cannot cut down on utilization or production of alumina for the growth of the economy, for the demand that I have to meet. Hence, I continue the production of aluminium, I continue the production of steel, power, everything. But I cannot cut down on these byproducts that are coming out. So, the red mud, having its attributes of iron oxide, alumina up to 30%, titanium dioxide up to 15%, silica up to 50%, and calcium oxide up to 14%, can be used as one of the substitutes as a land reclamation material, or it is also acting as another raw material to extract the ores that are present, like titanium or iron oxide that is present inside this material. And its pH, because caustic soda is used during Bayer's process, the pH of the red mud that is coming out of this process is also very high. So this pH is also being used for many applications where it has to take care of treatment of wastewater or for altering the soil's properties. And it can also be used as an activator with other materials, like the other pozzolanic materials we've been discussing about, like fly ash or slag, which requires a minimum pH for its activation, for the etching of silica to happen, so that the cementitious products can be created. Hence, red mud takes care of that activation process too, which I have worked out in my thesis and have used it as an activator in the slag too, and I have observed good results when I used only slag and red mud and slag associated together to improve the properties of the soil. So that is one of my experiences. And if we look into the other applications, it is used in making cement, bricks, tiles, geopolymer concrete. Soil modification can be done by using red mud. It can be used in wastewater treatment, can be used for filling up of mines and roads where voluminous or bulk consumption of the red mud is going to happen. And it can be used even for removal of heavy metals. And as mentioned, you can extract iron and titanium that is present inside these red mud for other processes. And red mud, if left unattended, is going to create a lot of respiratory problems again. And if you look into the plants, alumina plants, you can find lot of hills of this red mud that are available. And it requires good application or good research for voluminous consumption of the red mud so that I can reduce these deposits. Next is the rice husk ash. So India being an agriculture based economy, or major contributing product of the economy being agriculture, and within that paddy is one of the major sources. Paddy, after processing the grains, paddy grains, we get the rice husk. So this rice husk is basically used as a cattle feed, and if not used for cattle feed, or if rejected for cattle feed, the rice husk is burnt to create this rice husk ash. Rice husk ash is rich in silica. It is a byproduct of paddy, and around 4.4 million tons per annum is being produced in India, rice husk ash. How much are we going to consume, or how much are we going to deposit? Where are we going to deposit this? How much are we going to landfill, and what are the volume of landfills that are available? This is what is a big challenge that is in front of us. Hence, attributing to its aspect of 85% of silica, this is being used in replacement of cement, and is also being used in creating silicon chip, because the pure form, if they are able to extract the pure form of the silica that is present in the rice husk ash, it is used for silicon chip, and later it can be used for many IT applications. It can also be used as oil absorbent. It is used in cleanup of water, vulcanizing of rubber, used in ceramic and brick manufacturing industries, and it is also used as a co-processing or co-generating fuel in cement industries and steel plants, or many other industries, as a fuel, as a raw material. Here it is also taking care of substitution of the raw materials in terms of co-generating agent. So these are the major applications associated with rice husk ash. Next is the silica fumes, the other major sector for production of ferrosilicon alloy, or silicon that is being produced. The silica fumes are also called as microsilica, which is produced around 1.5 million tons globally. So all these which we have discussed previously, the statistics are as per Indian aspect, and this is 1.5 million tons which is produced globally. And this material is basically pozzolanic again and amorphous kind, and it contains around 95 or 97% of silica, and is extremely used in production of silicon gel, silicon carbide, and also it is used for creation of impermeable concrete. So silica fumes especially taken to create a type of concrete that is impermeable and is highly resistant or water repellent. Next is the bagasse ash. After paddy, it is sugarcane that is again the major product, agricultural product that is being generated in India. So from sugarcane, once the juice out of sugarcane is extracted, the sugarcane pulp or bagasse is what remains. So bagasse can be used as a fuel in many industries as a co-generating fuel. When this pulp is burnt to residues, it creates bagasse ash. So this bagasse ash is produced around in 9 million tons per annum in our country, and it has around 60% of silica and is again pozzolanic in nature. So one aspect if we identify from all these byproducts or waste that we are creating is that these are pozzolanic in nature and has good silica content, which makes them a good functioning material for the infrastructural applications, at least when we are talking about these reusing of these materials. So it is thus used as a replacement in silica, creation of silica gel, is used as an absorbent in water treatment, in cogeneration processes like for cement industry or for brick industry, where it acts as a fuel in one of the stages of manufacturing, and it can be used for ground improvement to improve the soil's properties, and also as ash filters. And next is the construction and demolition waste. So something that we have not observed or we have not looked into as the resource for activities that we are taking up is the construction and demolition waste. Everywhere you have a construction activity going on, you create some sort of waste that comes through the process of construction or due to demolition or due to any repair or renovation activities, which consists of lot of material that constitutes of bricks, rubble, dry plaster. It can be plumbing fixtures, plastics, glass, metal, wood, asphalt, everything. So if I can properly segregate, or if we say that this is one of the major inert material that is going to the landfill, it's only creating the volume which cannot and does not have any further application in terms of incineration. Like if it is an organic or vegetable waste, it can be used for generation of fuel through biomethanation or incineration or any other activities, or it can be converted to compost. But construction and demolition waste is one such material which does not have any aspect of creation of fuel or any component that can be used for creation of fuel, and is not degradable too. So it just adds on to the volume of the landfill, thereby reducing the life of the landfill. So if I can extract the material out of it, or if I can segregate and process it further, I would be able to create some good recycled aggregate, masonry, flooring material, fill material. It can be used as a good fill material because it is inert and it has already been a part of construction and will not have any further environmental issues associated. Volume is not a dearth because I have around 25 to 30 million tons per annum being produced. And if I can segregate out the metal and plastics can be recycled, and metal also can be recycled and can be used for appropriate activities. So a good initiative is required to set up a recycling plant for construction and demolition waste. Minimal processing is required. Only thing is segregation is required, so that I will be able to extract the useful material out of it, and I can use for majority of the infrastructural activities or soil improvement activities that are going on. And I can definitely meet the scarcity of the natural resources of sand and stone if I am able to extract the stone and sand after a few initial processing, and I can considerably reduce the volumes of waste that are going into the landfill. The government has set a few rules in disposal and handling of construction and demolition waste. There are many recycling plants that are set up in our country to use this waste. Yet we have so much of waste that is being produced, and we still have to explore into the utilizing of this waste for many activities. Next is the non-recyclable plastics. So plastics basically are of two types. If we categorize them as recyclable and non-recyclable, recyclable takes care of the HDPE, PET and all these types of waste, whereas non-recyclable waste, we talk about foams, we talk about thermoset type of plastics, laminated plastic and all these, which cannot be recycled. Even if it's recyclable plastic, there is a limit for the number of recycling times which we can do it. It's not an unlimited recycling ability that every plastic has. The life of the plastic reduces for every recycled activity. So we have this waste piling up every time. The plastic consumption or plastic use has increased tremendously from the past 2 decades, and the waste that is being produced is also too much. So if we can bring up the non-recyclable plastics, and if we can use them in co-processing of cement as a fuel, and with proper care such that no toxics are emitted into the environment, I can bring a good volume of use in co-processing. And the plastics can also be used in polymer blending for bituminous roads, where in the plastics can be shredded and can be used or mixed up with the bitumen, and which can be used for laying hydrophilic roads, or that are resistant for water, and can create good quality of roads by mixing these plastics with the bitumen at high temperatures. So one more aspect associated with plastics is, again, they are non-degradable. They take few thousands or millions of years to degrade, and if incinerated openly, they are going to release a lot of toxins into the environment that is going to contaminate the environment or air tremendously. So it is always better to recycle as far as we can. If not, we can send them for pyrolysis, or we can send them for cogeneration in cement plants, so that they can be consumed of in bulk for generation of fuel for many other activities. These are some of these materials which I have discussed. Apart from this, we have palm oil, fuel ash. Palm oil is gaining demand these days for a lot of aspects like that of cosmetics as well as for food industry. Non-recyclable glass, non-hazardous inerts that are going into the landfill, that are coming out of various activities in the landfilling itself. So if we are able to use or find applications for these materials, they can become good reusable or recyclable materials and can be used as regeo-materials, thereby or subsequently cutting down on the use of natural or raw materials. And these materials can also be proven to be environmentally safe, or I can do some processing so that they can become environmentally safe before they are directly put into the soils or for any constructional activity. So one thing that we can conclude, or we can talk when I look into all these materials, is all these materials can thus be called, these man-made resources can thus be called as sustainable materials, because they are creating an ecosystem which is sustainable within itself, without demanding for more and more raw materials from the nature or from the Mother Earth, and maintaining the system sustainable within itself, satisfying its requirements. So that's why these all contribute to sustainable materials. And one aspect that we, Professor Singh and myself, have developed during my PhD at IIT Bombay is what is sustainable development can be put in terms of extraction of minerals for the sake of the industrial development from the geo-environment or from the soil, leads to mining, and from the mining, when these minerals are processed through industrial activity, or we create few products and also industrial byproducts. These industrial byproducts will be unsafe to the environment when are left unattended. So these volumes, if can be processed and can be used for ground modification or for any other applications in the soils or for any constructional activity, would definitely take care of those emptiness that has been created by extraction of minerals through mining. So we are giving back to the earth what we have taken it in the form of mining. At least to some extent, I am able to replace the minerals that have been extracted through replacing it through the process of ground improvement by the sustainable materials. So altogether, my system has become sustainable, and we term this as the sustainable development. And these are some of the references that I have gone through, and thank you for the lecture, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. And Dr. Manish.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Thank you very much for your very informative and I will say deep learning lecture.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Madam, there are some few questions.
Yes, sure.
That is also with respect to this desiccation and cracking process. Madam, generally it is being found that whenever there is a de-airing in the soil, and that is a replacement of moisture from the soil. But I just want to know that any differentiation process you have or your team means you have been carried out, and how you are differentiating with respect to the what I mean to say as a mobility moisture, and also the moisture which is based on the seasonal changes. Means, is there any differentiation you are making while you are determining these characteristics?
To be frank, sir, I have directly correlated with the natural process of evaporation and with the um, addition of these materials. So I have not explored into heat of hydration induced moisture migration due to addition of cement, but I have gone through some literature where they have observed cracking of pavements or some case studies where the pavements have cracked post stabilization of the soils due to cement. So that's where I have brought that inference from, saying that it could be one of the reasons that excessive heat of hydration and inavailability of moisture could be one of the reasons of cracking
But
of
madam,
pavement.
what is our general observation that due to this cracking, actually this cracking may be continuous through a particular depth or may not be continuous through a particular depth. But the transpiration of air, or in other words, the transformation of air from one pore to the another or towards the complete depth, that process is being taking place continuously as a natural phenomena. Now, when the moisture mobility comes in contact with such type of phenomena, how long it will be means applicable to replace the humid air with this moisture, means because our air is also containing certain percentage of humidity in a particular season. So
Yes.
it is already adding that moisture in the moisture mobility, and it is this moisture which is being, as you said, that evaporating during a particular summer season or that, or means how to differentiate that.
Maybe we have to do some extensive studies in that regard, sir. In fact, that's a notable point where we have just looked into how the evaporation is happening, but we have not correlated that it is due to the stabilization or due to the natural evaporation. Maybe that is a very good add-on to the existing research that has to be done. Thank you so much. I should say this is one of the inputs that you have given, or maybe we should work together and we have to see how this moisture migration is happening. Is it due to the natural phenomena? So if there is no stabilizer added to it, then we can obviously relate it to the environment. But if I am adding some material to it, it will be a combination of both, definitely. But one thing that we could say is addition of this material through my studies, what I have observed is reducing the pores or the rate of evaporation that is happening. When I have monitored the evaporation rate before and after modification of the soil, is what is it cutting down on the rate of evaporation that is happening, and hence delaying the stresses that are developing in the soil, or delaying the cracking process or reducing the cracking process. I should
Because
say
madam,
I have a little knowledge in this regard, sir.
because madam, this question actually arises because last year we were also working on CND waste,
Okay.
and we were working the use of CND waste for reinforced earthfall as a
Okay.
granular field material, means as a replacement of granular field material. So during that study, when we are using this CND waste, and actually we were sandwiching this CND waste between the two good materials, or you can say yellow muram, or even we also had experimented with fly ash also. So in that case, when we are particularly working under different degrees of saturation with respect to the compressibility that is been taking place in CND waste. And as CND waste, we know that it's a core mixture of various construction materials, which may be pozzolanic, which may not be pozzolanic, and it is containing completely non-homogeneity with respect to one pore size and inner pore distribution. So when we were treating that soil, particularly as with respect to degree of saturation, this was our observation that In normal soil, what happens that the upper part of the soil gets easily dry up because of the heat or due of the evaporation and other things. But the amount of the air which has actually reached to the particular depth, okay, actually from there is a migration of air into the various further ore channels and everything. But this same phenomena we didn't observe, particularly in case of C&D waste, because of the unnatural distribution of the pores and other things. So that was the reason that we were, because when we are proposing any material for such embankments or such characteristics, the long-term compressibility characteristics or the long-term creep phenomena plays a very vital role.
Yes.
So that was the reason that I raised this question, madam, that is there any study can be done on this or not?
Okay, so maybe my article or my paper on the mechanism of stabilization maybe could answer, or maybe you can get some idea out of it, like how I have done. We have done further the processing of the stabilized material. Maybe that could give you some add-ons or some points to that. You can please refer to it. That's available on the internet. It's an ACEM paper.
Yeah, yes, madam. Madam, one question from participant.
Sir.
Also, that although there is a large percentage replacement of fly ash for production of PPC, why there is not much difference in the cost of OPC and PPC?
That has to be taken care by the policies that are being used, sir, because the replacement is still 30%, and one thing that the quality of fly ash that we are creating is also one of the issues, like how much of the fly ash that we are using for the cement replacement is also a matter, which the quality of fly ash, and that quality of fly ash, how much is being replaced, like I've mentioned class C and class F. Maybe I don't know whether this is the right point that I am touching or not, but this is where I feel we are lacking in producing a good quality of fly ash that is replacing the cement. Other than that, they are being used mostly for this bricks and all, so there most of the volume might be getting consumed of.
Okay. Any more questions from participants, or any more thing you want to like to discuss? Participants, please be free to. Okay, just one last question. Madam, mostly when we talk of these sustainable materials, no doubt, initially you gave some examples of stone, bricks and other things, which we are using, or lime, which we are using since, I think, say, thousands and hundreds of years. But when it comes to the question of using some new sustainable material, or to be converted as a long-term sustainable material, okay, which parameters you think are very important as far as the from specification points of view we should consider, or initially we should keep in mind when we are going for experimental testing? Because this is general major question which arises when I took any new material or a waste material, as far as the experimental studies are being modeled.
So as per my knowledge, it's one major aspect, it's its composition, so that it can substitute the existing material for whichever purpose you are using. And secondly, what is its impact on the environment? Its composition itself will give us what is if there are any toxic or heavy metals that are present in it. So the second aspect would be to bring it to full utilization, or to make it a complete sustainable material. It has to take care of its presence in the geo environment too. So these two would be the major aspects as per my understanding of what a sustainable material is.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Thank you. So, madam, on behalf of Applied Mechanics Department, Delhi College of Engineering, I am really wholehearted thankful to you that you accepted our invitation humbly, and you have delivered a wonderful, excellent lecture on sustainable materials.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
would
so
also
much.
further thank that we had little bit change in our schedule, and that also you accepted very humbly and raised this STTP, madam. So thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, sir. It
We will
was my
now
pleasure to
remain
be
in
a part
touch
of this.
in future also, and we will take your expertise help when we work on sustainable materials, madam.
Sure, sir. I'll help you.